What is up, YouTube? HCJ here, and I hope you guys are doing well. It is time to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, known in the OCG as Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 3, The Tri-God Advent. Now, this game was released in the TCG March 19th of 2002. If you're playing it in the OCG, this game was released for you July 13th of 2000, meaning that this game in the OCG is 25 years old, while here in the TCG it is approximately 23 years old. It's 23 years old, making it probably one of the oldest of the Yu-Gi-Oh video games, next to Yu-Gi-Oh Forbidden Memories, which I didn't know until doing research for this game. Literally came out a whole day later. And according to the videos I've been watching about this game, many people have said, yeah, we've gotten this game. And the crazy thing about this game was that, this game was released literally the next day. And then they even had the Prima guide for Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories intertwined. No, literally, it was a Prima guide for both Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories and for Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories. They literally gave them the same Prima guide because they probably figured, oh, well, you guys will buy both games. Look, some people's parents don't have access to that type of money. My mom wasn't buying me a PlayStation and a Game Boy Color at the same time to go get me two games. Nah, we had like 4 kids in my house. My mom had, shoot, we were sharing games. So, let's talk about some more history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories. So, like I mentioned, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 3. This is the third installment of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters video games. The other two were not released on the Game Boy systems um, during their initial release, or would have easily been, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't out in North America by that time. The EU didn't get Yu-Gi-Oh! Till about a year later, in 2002, so they didn't receive this game or Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories until 2003. Some areas didn't receive the game until 2004. Can you believe that? Which is crazy, I know, but that's how video games worked back then. And I think some games actually just ended up replacing other video games. And from what I learned about Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2004, that is very apparent as some of those games didn't get released until later dates within that year. Some games didn't come out to the year after because they were still waiting for confirmation about other games being added into the lineup too. Yeah, crazy, ain't it? Now, for Yu-Gi-Oh! Um, for Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, or Yu-Gi-Oh! DDS for short, DDS has a history of things in it that makes it what it is. And a lot of it actually was inspired by Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. Because in Japan, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories came out December 9th of 1999. So they wanted to have that same aspect of the mechanics in that game and throw those into more of a handheld variant. Because the Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games at this point in time were basically just summon your strongest monster to beat over your opponent's monster. If you can find someone, if you power it up with spells, you defend it with your trap cards, and you basically win the game. And you know the typical methods of winning Yu-Gi-Oh! Around that time were either you deplete your opponent's life points to 8,000, you win by the alternate conditions of having Exodia in your hand, or if your opponent cannot draw cards on their next draw phase, um, or unable to draw due to the effects of a card forcing them to draw. So those three major, win conditions. Those are really much like the only way you could. Those were just the win conditions. There was really much nothing else like how things got abruptly different later on in the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. With stuff like Victory Dragon, Destiny Board, and so on and so forth. So, in terminology of how this game portrays itself, you have 5 tiers of opponents that you encounter. Each tier of duelists has their own number of duelists, and you defeat each of them 5 times to move on to the next tier. Now, By the time you get to tier 5, you will be awarded at least one opponent. But if you would like to face another opponent from that tier, you would have to enter a password just like you would enter for the base game to put cards into the game. Many of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise games have this system where you can enter the 8-digit password on the bottom of the card on the left-hand side. Once you've entered that card's code into the game, then you're able to then proceed into having a copy of that card in the game. Most games will only permit you to have one copy of the card via the password system. Some games would have you later on use what's called dual points or DP to then spend the DP to actually get the card and obtain it to put multiple copies of it in your deck. It's very tedious, we know, but the ordeal was that they wanted you to actually play, create decks, play them, and battle against the opponents that they set within the game. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not a bad thing. It's just, when you play the physical card game, you're used to going out getting the cards, whether you're pulling them from packs, buying them online, or trading with people to get them. Trust me, a lot of them have their own circumstances of let's hope we hit something and not miss. Now, in the fracture of that, there's also a lot of mechanics in this game that take both from its predecessors, also takes from Forbidden Memories, and then also gives to its successors like Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards and Yu-Gi-Oh! Refeat of Destruction. And I'm only mentioning those because there's also one game I'm forgetting to mention, and that's the legit predecessor of Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, which never came to America until the release of the Early Day Collection, which is Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 4 Battle of the Great Gods, which for the 3 variations that it has, each cover was different from each other. One having Yugi Moto, the other one having Seto Kaiba, and one having Joey Wheeler, each with a respective Egyptian god. Crazy thing about it is that Joey's picture depicts him having the winged dragon of Ra. At this time, if these games were to come out in North American release by around that time they were released, oh, it would have had head spinning because people would then try to ask, why does Joey have an Egyptian god? He doesn't have any lineage to Egypt. Did he beat Merrick in the duel that we have not seen yet? Is Merrick not as powerful as he thinks he is? Does Joey come in and save the day? And as you know, no, he didn't. But then Joey did eventually get out the shadow realm because plot, right? Right. So, what additions can I mention about this game? Well, let's talk about a lot of the in-game mechanics. There is an elemental system. And what I mean by elemental system is that each card has an attribute attached to it. We know this in the regular card game as there's 7 attributes in it. We have water, wind, fire, earth, light, dark, and divine. While in Yu-Gi-Oh's case of its earlier games, they had about 11 different attributes. And each of those attributes clashed with another through a Pokemon-esque weakness situation. For instance, water would beat fire, and fire would beat forest. Forest beats wind, wind beats earth, earth beats thunder, thunder beats water, and cycles through. However, for the other scale of things, there were light, shadow, fiend, and dream. Light would beat the fiends would beat the dreams beats the shadows, and the shadows beat the light. And that was their own quadrifecta of things outside of the normal elemental situation. This does pick up later on with Yu-Gi-Oh! Sacred Cards, Yu-Gi-Oh! Refeat of Destruction, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses, and I can't speak for Yu-Gi-Oh! The False Bound Kingdom because I've never played that game, but I just know the ones that do focus on having that Pokemon-esque aspect. More so attaining to it, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Battle of the Great Gods also takes account of this too. And I'm sorry if I'm leaving that out because I honestly have not played much of it, and what I played of it I really didn't like. So when I do that video, I'll explain more of why I don't like Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 4 Battle of the Great Gods. Now, in terms of everything attached to this current game, let's go through more of its mechanics, where you have the elemental system. If the monsters of a certain element defeated an element that they were stronger against, they would be destroyed. If they were to lose the battle, I believe they were also destroyed as well, even if they were in defense position. You wouldn't take any life points, and if your monster happened to have lower stats than the monster it was defeated, then you wouldn't take any damage, neither would your opponent. The card would just be eliminated. Then, I know this is early game Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies and game mechanics. Trust me, they talked about this in an interview with the late Kazuka Takahashi, where he explained through his early developments of the card game and its rules, he wanted to take something that was completely different from what was shown in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zero, and wanted to basically try to mitigate things for what would become the card game that we've grown up and grown our relationship with. Now, when that came to, there's also one other mechanic in the game, is the card part system. Now, in this game, after defeating your opponent, you would receive a card part from either Taya or Yugi's grandfather, because there's another thing about this game that most people didn't know either. Until people played it later on, and internet and stuff, was that in the game, and if you read the Prima guides or any guides for Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel stories, you can enter a certain code and it will have Yugi's grandfather appear. At the end of each duel, he will give you a card part just like Taya, and he will also give you a card. Now, his cards were a lot different from what she would normally give you. Taya normally gives you maybe a monster or two from the pool that probably either is really, really good or really, really bad or very, very just there. While Yugi's grandfather would give you a ritual card, he would give you a really good spell, whether it's a spell to power up monsters, destroy monsters, or even so, give you a trap card that would do the same thing. One of the craziest things that I've ever received from Yuki's grandfather was him giving me Crush Card Virus, which is a spell card in the game. Yeah, many cards have a different change up to what they are in the traditional Yu-Gi-Oh card game. For instance, Dark Elf is an effect monster that you paid 1,000 life points in order for her to attack. And you had to pay that 1,000. Well, in this game, she's not an effect monster. She's a vanilla. Even more so, cards like Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest are also normal monsters in this game. They do have some flavor text attached to them, but they don't have the abilities like they would in a regular card game. While there are some cards that did get abilities, like for instance, Yugi's Giant Soldier of Stone has the ability to turn the battlefield into a wasteland. The Spirit of the Mountains has the ability to turn the field into mountains. Despite the fact that it's a spellcaster with forest attribute, it's turning the field to benefit for thunder, dragon, and wind monsters. Well, winged beast monsters. Early Yu-Gi-Oh for you, huh? Then on top of that, you had spells like Electro Whip that would equip only to female monsters, giving them bonuses, while you have cards like Sword of the Deep, no, Sword of, Malevolent Nuzzler, that she only equips to either female or shadow attributed monsters. Yeah, the crazy things that a lot of the cards were changed to from their primitive cards in the regular game. Mind you, these were the early involvements of what the game was going to look like, and many things did abruptly change. There are even cards in the game that were never released, such as the ritual spells for many of the monsters that are in the current game as it is. There's traps like Wire Trap, Bear Trap, and Invisible Trap that were basically taken out for different changes. I think some of the cards end up being things like Acid Trap Hole, Adhesive Trap Hole, but the other traps were not abruptly added to the game, to the physical card game. If they were, they would probably be called Trap Hole cards, and then Jesus, with their abilities, they would really make trap tricks really, really deadly upon arrival. Some of them probably had to be limited or banned just because of how broken they got. Look at things like Bottomless Trap Hole and how it was limited to semi-limited for a period of time. There are, of course, field spells, and unlike normal, the field spell took up the entire field. But in order to get rid of the field spell, you either had to play a field spell or have a monster with an ability to change the field spell. There were quite a few duelists that did take advantage of the field spell, like for instance, Mako Tsunami, who's known for his deck of water monsters, loved playing with Umi any chance he would get. And I do believe there is a monster in the game that changed the field to Umi. So that even benefited him even more. Not to mention in later games, he also got some monsters that did that as well too. Like Maiden of the Aqua, which turned the field into Umi. Because in the real game, she treats herself as Umi. It even gives monsters an additional attack buff. Now, for other additional things in the game, um, besides the card part system, which you would take the card parts, put them together, and then create a new monster, there is the deck capacity in your duelist level. So every time you would defeat an opponent, your duel level will go up by 1, and your deck capacity will go up by 5, encouraging you to play the game more and more until you had the optimal amount to put a lot of cards into your deck. Because while some cards had a deck capacity, many of them were probably over what your deck capacity could hold at the current time. Looking at cards like Gemini Elf, who were extremely powerful monsters back then, cannot be present in your deck because her deck capacity was extremely high. So you would have to wait till later on in the game to be able to put her into the deck. Because of how powerful she was. There were even there were restrictions on every aspect of both spells, traps, and monsters. Really good spells and traps had a high count, while some spells and traps were easy to put in because they had 0 cost. Ritual spells had no cost at all, and ritual summoning a monster was similar to that of what the game itself is now. You would need the ritual spell in your hand, have the required monsters on the field, and then activate the spell to send the required monster to the grave to summon the ritual monster. However, because of how the game itself is structured, you need a specific monster for the ritual summon. Just for instance, like you would see in the anime and the manga. A big prime example of that is Blackluster Soldier. In order to summon him, you need Gaia the Fierce Knight and another monster in order to go for the summon. Same thing in this video game. You need Blackluster Ritual, so you can summon the Blackluster Soldier. Now, these cards would come out of nowhere, and as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel, they have now put the Ritual monsters into the extra deck, kind of making sense of why it was so easy for Yu-Gi to summon both his Blackluster Soldier and his Magician of Black Chaos without having to have them in his hand. Then, fusion monsters, which, yes, there are fusions in the fusion monsters in the game, but not actual fusion itself. The mechanic of fusion only became more apparent as the more modern games came to be. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, you simply place monsters on top of monsters and you see what the results would be. Similar to that of Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories and Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses, where when you combine two cards, you would see if they would fuse. If the cards couldn't fuse, the card that inducted the fusion would cancel out the card that it's trying to fuse with. But if the fusion was successful, you got some really kick butt monsters. There's an entire game facts thread on every fusion possible in the game, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Just know that if you're trying to play the fusion monster, play the fusion monster on the field. The fusion monster can't swing that turn, but you're still able to do an additional summon that turn, so it keeps you into the game. Now, from there, not too much else to really talk about. The password system, like I said earlier, you can enter 8 coded password on the bottom left of your card to have the card be accessible into the game. There's a part of the main menu where you can battle against someone through connect cables. There's the card construction you can easily do, and then of course there's the main campaign. In the main campaign, you're able to face your opponents. Each tier has their own selected amount of duelists and who is there retrospectively. In the first wave, I would like to call them the Duelist Kingdom and not the Domino City like they called them in the game, because there's also a second set of duelists called Domino's Kingdom stage. So for stage 1, you have Yugi, Joey, Tristan, Mai, and Mako. For the second stage that they named Duelist, Domino City, and has an actual picture of Domino City in the background. You have Esperoba, Weevil Underwood, Rex Raptor, Seto Kaiba, and both Rare Hunter and not Pandora, Arcana. Pandora is his Japanese name, and for Rare Hunter, his name in Japanese is Seeker. This Rare Hunter, of course, is the one that you know that has Exodia. He was the one that took Red Eyes and Yugi won it back. Then the tier 3 duelist is Ancient Egypt. Many of these characters you can actually find in Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. And those characters are Simon Moran, who is known as Paradox, Ishizu Ishtar, making her first appearance, um, Priest Seto, who is the ancient version of Seto Kaiba, and Hai Shin, who's making his first digital debut. I do believe he's in the other games, and I'm sure someone will leave that in the comment section just to clarify it. But they had to change his name later on for the European release. From there is the tier 4 duelist, which is only one, and that is Dark Knight, who is the opponent that you face in Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. And then from there is the tier 5 duelist. Now, once you defeat Dark Knight, he will then give you a password for the credits, but then when you come back to see if there's another tier, there will be. And that's when you get to face Yami Yugi. Now, if you enter the 8-digit passcode, you can switch between each of the respective duelists. But you won't see the other duelists in your records count of seeing how many wins and how many duels you participated in. The duelists will cycle between Yugimoto, Yami Yugi, Shadi, Yami Bakura, Merrick Ishtar, and Nightmare, who is basically Dark Knight's boss, and making his appearance in that game as well. And these are pretty much the strongest duelists in the game. They have some really cool combinations. They have really strong cards, but they are easy to take down if you have the strategies built. My experience with this game and why, I love this game after the 2 months of playing it. Excuse me. Oh, sinuses. Is simply because this game has so many mechanics that I love from Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards, which is a game I played way before I even did a video on it as well. And I love the just sheer combination of cards and decks that you can make, the amount of cards that you can put into the game and have fun with, the tons and tons of deck combinations, and even with the restrictions of how decks can be comprised, you can fuse and make other monsters and then go from there. Now, I've only made a couple of fusions in the deck. Most notoriably is just fusing for some really big hitters, but having to wait a turn because they're frozen because of the game stipulation with fusion. But it's still really, really good. And honestly, I highly recommend it if you would like to play one of the older variations of Yu-Gi-Oh! I could recommend the Sacred Cards if you want more of a story-based, or even Repeat of Destruction just to continue on that story. Some people will probably recommend you some of the mainline games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Eternal Duelist Soul for more of the constructed variants. Worldwide Edition, because this is a better variation of Eternal Duelist Soul cards in the pool. Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship if you wanted more structure there, and just the plethora of other Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games throughout the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Now, I'm not going to ever knock any of them down. Some of them have their good and some of them have their flaws, just like, this game has a lot of flaws as well. I don't like the pandering, dealing with certain monsters and having to deal with restrictions, only being able to set one card at a time. You have to discard cards from your hand. Monsters are frozen in your hand, so unless you plan to discard them through going into the menu to then selecting in phase or discarding them, it's pretty tedious. And then always having to press the A button to constantly go through the motions of things too. Actually, Yu-Gi-Oh! Sacred Cards didn't make that much better, and it probably wasn't that much better with Yu-Gi-Oh! Battle of the Great Gods too. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's still a recommendedly fun game. And do I recommend it? Yeah. What is my rating for it? If I were to ever rate it? Oh, I give it an 8 out of 10. Still, good concept, base Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. Has its flaws, but the music in it, oh, I forget to talk about the music. The music in it is really, really good. And some of the music, actually, you'll hear in Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories, because I believe the music for the verses, a player, that's actually the music for, what was it? Oh, the regular music, the free duel music. is there. And then there's the music for battling, I think it's Kaiba. I can't hum it out, but if you know, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, then you know. And then you know the music it traverses. And even some of the later games, I believe, also use some of those tracks as well, because I just found out that Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories and Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories have the same set of composers. And then those composers went on to make some of the later games as well. So shout outs to them. Now, I'm going to wrap up my video here because, of course, retrospectives can be long. But one thing about playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games is that they're always a ton of fun. And I do highly recommend it, if possible, get the Early Days collection so you can play these games, whether it's on Steam or Nintendo Switch. And of course, there's always simulation, but I don't want Nintendo coming to find me. But hey, things are things. And hey, they even have ways to break the rules in their game, because Early Collection has a way that you can make it easier for you to play the game and not have to do so much of the grinding. They kind of just shut that out. But hey, that's what games do nowadays in some cases. But yeah, with that said and done, I'm gonna wrap up this video. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think of Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories. Is it your favorite? Is there some parts of it that you like, some parts of it you don't like? Let me know that all in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, as it helps me out tremendously. You can hit the notification bell to be informed of when I upload more content. Socials are in the description box below. And with that said and done, thanks everyone for watching. HPJ signing out.